Hey there, it's Cindy Thomas, your career coach and strategist. The Insiders Career Club was recently rated in the top 20 job search podcasts by FeedSpot. Check out their website link. It'll be in the podcast notes. Now, let's meet our special guest. Hey there, this week's guest is Brian L. Williams. He's the managing partner at Greenberg Gross LLP, but he's also a distinguished trial lawyer who has served as lead counsel in high-stakes trials across California and Nevada. His practice centers on cases involving sexual abuse, physical assault, employment litigation, severe injury, or wrongful death, driven by a commitment to justice. Brian brings his clients' stories to the forefront, using his platform via widespread media coverage to amplify critical issues and make a lasting impact. Let's welcome him into the show. Brian, good afternoon. Welcome to the Insiders Career Club podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Oh, I'm looking forward to this. So let's start off with you sharing a little bit about your experience, both as a trial lawyer, and then elaborate on why you made the transition to what you are doing now.
Sure. So I've been a lawyer for going on 22 years now. I practice primarily in the state of California, although we now have active cases in a lot of other states, primarily Nevada and New York. I've been trying cases since I was about 3 to 4 years out of law school. Loved it. Loved the opportunity to get in front of a jury and argue your case on your client's behalf in the courtroom. It's kind of, from my perspective, why I went to law school. And then, as you progress in age and experience, you progress in a law firm structure. And now I spend a lot of my time, frankly, just managing the business of a law firm that has 4 offices in 3 different states and employees in multiple states and even foreign countries. And so I spend a lot of my time, frankly, just, again, managing the business aspect.
Doing the administrative piece of it. Now, but you do, on the other half, focus on disputes in employment and sexual harassment or child abuse and traumatic brain injury, correct?
Yeah. One of my primary focuses is representing survivors of childhood sexual abuse. That's a passion of mine. I have 4 kids of my own, and if I can do something in the law that makes the world a little bit better, a little bit safer in the future for kids, I can't think of a better way to use my law degree. So I do a lot of those cases in California, Nevada, and in New York. Tragically, there's far too many of those cases, and kids these days get abused, unfortunately, very regularly in schools and churches and daycares and sporting activities, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So that's certainly one area of my practice. I do a lot of cases on behalf of employees who have been mistreated in the workplace. That could be, discrimination because of their age or sex or, whatever it might be. I do a lot of whistleblower retaliation cases where someone reports, wrongdoing by their employer, and in exchange, they get fired for it, which you can't do.
Yes.
We represent a lot of employees who have been mistreated. And then we also do a lot of nursing home cases. So, just like kids who are a vulnerable set of population in the context of sexual abuse cases, tragically, as we get older and we enter into nursing homes or assisted care facilities, we're a little bit more vulnerable at that point in our lives too. And people take advantage of those vulnerabilities and mistreat residents in nursing home cases. So I do basically the whole span of someone's life, children who are mistreated, employees who are mistreated, and then the elderly who are mistreated at the latter stages of their lives.
Great way to look at it, Brian. What would you say are the most challenging aspects of representing clients in cases that involve serious injuries or sensitive issues like the sexual abuse?
On the client level, I think it would be managing their expectations in terms of time. The civil justice system does not work as quickly as anybody wants it to. So if I have parents who come in because their child is abused, I understand that they want and deserve justice right now. The court system doesn't work that way. If I can get a case pushed through in 1 to 3 years, that's pretty quick. So it's hard to, it's a privilege to be able to help those kids. And it's at times difficult to walk them down the path that it takes to get to the time when you get to argue your case in front of a jury or settle your case with the defendant. On a personal level, those cases are very heavy, very deep. Take a lot of that stuff home with you. So it's a particular challenge for me to create that separation so that when I go home to my own family, I'm not too,
You're not bringing it with you. Yeah.
I'm not bringing it home with me. So those would be the two that pop out as the biggest challenges that I face handling those kinds of cases.
Okay. And so since you mentioned that, how do you balance that out? What do you do for yourself to, I used to work at a not-for-profit and I trained inner city youth to find jobs. This is a long time ago. And, when I started, they warned me, they said, be careful. You'll absorb a lot of this and you don't want to do that. It's going to drag you down. So what do you do, Brian?
Well, first off, I recognize that it is a privilege. And I mean that, like, I'm doing this because I want to, not because I have to. And so there are days I remind myself that it is a privilege to try to help these kids and hold institutions that enable sexual abuse accountable. Second, I rely on my wife, who's a wonderful human being. And she helps me as soon as I do get home to sort of make that transition. And of course, then you see a kid, my kids are all, in college or grown now, but I spend a lot of time with my kids. The dog cheers you up, things like that. I think it takes a little bit of time as you transition from one to the other, but I just remind myself of why I'm doing it. And that at the end of the day, I'm trying to better those people's lives and also better the lives of my family.
Okay. All right. Have you noticed any significant changes in how the legal system handles employment disputes or abuse cases over the years?
Definitely. So listen, from a context of abuse cases, I'll start there and we can switch to employment. Okay. Abuse cases, I think legislatures across the United States are realizing that survivors of abuse take years, if not decades, before they make the decision to reveal their trauma. And that's an accepted norm. It's very well documented in medical literature as to why individuals who have gone through such horrific trauma don't immediately come out and talk about it. And so what I see across the country is the legislatures realizing that and thus adjusting statute of limitations so that when these survivors do feel comfortable sharing their story and do come forward to hold those responsible accountable, they can do so and not be barred by a rule that says, hey, if you didn't file within 2 years, like if this is a circumstance with a car accident, that means you can't sue. So I see throughout the country, states recognizing that and expanding the access to the court system, at least the civil court system, on abuse cases. On employment cases, I think society as a whole has just recognized that, employees across the country are mistreated by their employers at times. And those employees have rights, and those employees should be commended for raising issues because they are, after all, reporting against a very large corporation most of the times who employed them. And there's a huge power differential between the two of them. And I think just as a whole, society and thus our court system too, recognize that employees are speaking out more. And the laws vary across states, but there are fundamental things that employers cannot do. And if they do, they'll be held accountable by lawyers like me and the civil court system. So whether that's, treating someone differently because of their age or their race or their gender or some medical condition they have, not paying overtime, all kinds of things, the law over the last few years has evolved in a way that gives employees a voice in a courthouse.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that it's easier to actually gather enough information for a case? Because in some cases, if you say you're treated badly, that's subjective, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So that can be very difficult to pin down. I'm thinking.
I think in today's age, though, a lot more things are documented, even if it's not on a piece of paper, right? In the workplace, sure, there are still, face-to-face or closed office meetings where in an adversarial context like a lawsuit, it's one person's word versus the other person's word in that room. Mm-hmm. But frankly, if you think about the everyday workplace now, so many things are documented in emails or some kind of internal messaging system like Slack or Microsoft Teams. And people, I had cases where, bosses and subordinate employees text each other all the time. So even though it's not formal documentation, it's actually in writing and it's saved on a computer server somewhere. It could be social media posts, could be all kinds of instant messaging applications. that do in fact document what takes place inside a workplace. So I think as technology evolves in that area, an employee's ability to prove their case only gets better.
Okay. All right. What changes would you like to see happen from a legal perspective to better support the victims of abuse or employment disputes?
Yeah, a lot, right? I mean, here's how I see it. So I wish that no child was ever abused, right? I mean, that would be everybody's wish.
Or the
And
ideal.
I use this line quite a bit, but tragically, the world will continue to create or produce pedophiles. I don't know why. I'm not a criminal psychologist who could explain the mentality that it takes for a perpetrator to commit such a heinous thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that it'll continue to happen. What I hope, though, is that the legal system, at least in the context of what I do, which is the civil legal system, can do more to hold the institutions accountable who allow those pedophiles to thrive in our society. So what I mean by that, Cindy, is there are places that attract individuals with, who are pedophiles to the workplace. It could be a church. It could be an Uber driver. It could be a school teacher, tragically, where those people who have those tendencies actually get jobs working in that field because they will have access to kids. If I and other lawyers across the country can hold those institutions accountable for hiring those people and not keeping a close enough lookout for them and not making sure that they're actively supervising those children, then perhaps I can get the institution to change, which thus restricts that access to kids and hopefully makes society a little bit safer as a whole. So it's a grand ambition, but it's one that I take very personal. And I feel like institutions are changing. The Boy Scout, scandal that comes out and the scandals with the Catholic Church and whatnot. I'd like to think that institutions like that have changed for the better now. And it's because because they were forced to.
Well, I hope so. Yeah. Stuff still slides underneath the radar, but let's hope it's better and people will hold each other accountable.
100%.
What are you seeing right now with regard to work trends that have changed? Because there's a lot going on in the workplace with technology and all of that. It's caused a lot of change just from an employment perspective and what employers are looking for in their employees.
Yeah, great question. So again, and not take away the trial lawyer part of me. I operate a business with a lot of employees across the country. I see a number of things. I think one is the advancement of AI or artificial intelligence and how businesses can use AI to operate more efficiently. And that is changing. I mean, literally every day. I get pitched a lot of products, AI products of, hey, use this and it'll help, run your business. And the things I was being pitched 6 months ago versus the things I was pitched last week the rate of advancement in that area is huge. And so as a dad who has a bunch of college age kids that have to go out and make careers for themselves, I preach to them all the time that you got to find a job that isn't going to be replaced by AI, but just supplemented by AI. Because I think that's the key, right? Right. AI is not going anywhere. The billions and billions of dollars being invested in it really prevent it from going anywhere.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And so I tell people all the time, I truly don't believe, and I'm not concerned that AI will replace lawyers because, the robot can't go into the courtroom and argue the case in front of 12 people. Right?
Yeah.
But I do believe that lawyers that know how to effectively use AI will replace lawyers that don't. And I think law is my business, but I think you could probably say that to almost any business. I think there's a trend in the workplace of using AI for what it's probably intended to be, which is an efficiency tool to make humans even more productive in a workplace. I think that's crucial because, again, it's here to stay, like it or not. And forget the science fiction part of it because I don't know what's going to happen 10 years from now, but it's here, so people need to adapt. And I also think remote work is still a very big deal, at least in California and the other states that I'm in. We give access to remote from work options on a hybrid schedule to every single one of our employees for a reason. And that's because it's hard to compete for good employees if you don't.
Yes.
We learned a little something about the workplace from COVID, probably an unintended consequence, but we did learn that people can be trustworthy, good employees are still trustworthy and good employees from home. And
Absolutely.
both sides know that now. And so I personally believe, and I know that everyone doesn't share this, but I think it's here to stay. And it's just a
Oh, I do
matter
too.
of where each employer is going to draw the line, and you can create whatever policy you want. You just have to make sure you implement it fairly.
Mm-hmm. No, I do believe that remote work is here to stay. It's hard to take something away from an employee that you've given them already. I mean, I used to work in HR. I was director of talent acquisition. And the years before that, I was a recruiter. And when you're dealing with people's money and promotions and whatever, sometimes you have the odd person that's going to do either a lateral move or one that is actually a grade below. It's rated below. I shouldn't say a grade, but the position is rated lower than the one that they're in because they want to step back. Well, they're making a higher salary. They're going to go into another job. You never take away that money. They just don't get raises, until they catch up with everybody else, and it's fine. So that whole perspective to me from an ethical employer that has an ethical HR person, that's what will happen. That will not be taken away.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think people are looking for that when they're looking for a new job. I mean,
Well,
it's one of the first
absolutely.
questions that we get asked when we're interviewing new candidates is they want to know if that's an option. And
Absolutely.
again, we've made the choice that it is an option for almost every position. There are certain positions where it
You
just
can't
doesn't,
do it.
but for the most part, it does. And if you have a hybrid schedule, 3 days in the office and 2 days at home, or however you want to fashion it,
Mm-hmm.
everything can still work fine. And everybody who's a good employee will still be a good employee. And it's just a matter of, frankly, it's a way to weed out those that are not. And it's a way to stay competitive to trying to get A talent, which is
Absolutely.
what we all want.
Absolutely. And it goes back to your hiring practices. If you're doing a good job of vetting people from the reasons that, why are they there? Why do they want to work for your company? You look at their past history, or you try to do your best to vet them out with habits and whatever. You'll hire the right people, and they will be working from home when they're working from home.
Yeah. I mean, I have international employees who work obviously remotely because I don't bring them into the office. That'd be quite the commute. And again, it doesn't work for every position in a law firm or a doctor's office or whatever, but it can work for a lot of them. And you can gain some competitive advantages if you manage it correctly, in my opinion.
Yeah. And it can save you money. If you don't need a larger office, if you have half your staff in and out and maybe they share a desk, I mean, you figure it out. What advice would you offer to young attorneys who want to specialize in helping individuals that have gone through loss or have employment disputes or anything else?
Sure. I think two things. Number one, and they're really related, but you need to get practical advice. I think people have a perception of what law school teaches a lawyer, but it's not necessarily how to be a lawyer. They teach you the law and they teach you how lawyers think, and they teach you the fundamental principles of the law. And of course, they teach you how to pass a bar exam. But being a lawyer, the day-to-day of a lawyer is not necessarily something that's covered in law school, or at least not to a great extent. You need to get a job at a law school or in law school, even during the summers and whatnot, that teach you what I always call the practical side of the law. There's a difference between what's in all those books, although now they're all virtual books, but about legal cases or whatnot. But it's another thing entirely to deal with, a case itself and how you interact with the human beings involved in the case and make your way in and around the courtroom. Consistent with that, my second piece of advice would be to find a mentor. I was fortunate enough about a year out of law school to attach myself to someone who was willing to be my mentor. He was my boss at that point in time. He later became my business partner, and he showed me the ropes. And I think if I look back and say what made me successful as a young lawyer, it would have been, the answer is like person. It was him, right? And I think as much as anything a younger lawyer can do to find that mentor, to work with someone closely, to again learn the practical side of being a law, the day-to-day, interactions of being a lawyer. I think that's huge.
Absolutely. Well, actually, let me go back to what we were just talking about. So you were talking about the training that you get in law school. I know that they'll teach you how to read people. So there's the EI quotient of it, right? But do they also, how does ethics play into it? Because there's the ethical way to look at the law, I guess, and interpret it. But then what about when you are treating people as your client, how you deal with them, how you even handle the case that you're working on with their interest in mind? So is there an ethical piece to that, Brian?
Yeah, absolutely. So law school does a good job of teaching you ethics. Ethics are rules and pieces of law that are created both federally and at the state level where individuals actually practice law. And I think law school and the tests that you take after law school and even the periodic, we all have continuing education requirements as lawyers. They do a good job of instilling the foundational ethical principles that we all must have to be a lawyer. I think what you're hitting on another point, which is the day-to-day, again, I keep using this word, practical side of being a lawyer. When a client comes in your office and presents a set of facts to you in a circumstance that you have to then not just evaluate from a legal perspective, right? But also from an ethical perspective of, are there any ethical issues that are raised in my representation of client A for any variety of reasons? It could be what client A is doing, could be who client A wants to sue. And, maybe you have practiced work with those people. There's a lot of ethical issues that arise in the practical, everyday practice of law that is a little different than how you learn in law school, but the law school is not doing anything wrong. They're teaching you the fundamentals, the foundation, and then you hope that as a whole, practitioners throughout the United States are conducting themselves ethically, to holding themselves to a high standard. Because if that doesn't happen, then people's ability to trust and rely upon lawyers disappears, and ethics is a huge role. I mean, we have outside ethics counsel that our firm, everybody knows they could call if they have a question and they want to bounce an idea off somebody. That's pretty common. There are hotlines with every state's bar organizations where you can call and anonymously get, ethical advice on how to deal with a particular issue. And I think that stuff is really good, because without it, the society's trust of lawyers erodes, and that's not good for anybody.
Yeah. What do you think the overall opinion of lawyers is from the public view of your profession? I know that it can vary a lot. So do you feel that if it is negative, how do you overcome that when you're dealing with a client?
So great question. Pick the last part. What I think as a whole, look, I mean, there's lawyer jokes exist for a reason, right? And there's some good ones, and I enjoy, good lawyer jokes. And I think it's fine. I think some of the, what I would call traditional advertising firms that you see on TV or radio or whatnot, they don't help that narrative, because some of it, is odd, just to I'll use that word. But I think as a whole, people know that lawyers are needed and they serve a valuable role. I remember someone telling me very early on that no one likes a lawyer until they need one, right?
Exactly.
And I don't think that'll ever change, but the lawyers throughout the country could do a better job of helping our public perception context of how they advertise or how they conduct themselves, and, publicly at least.
I would agree. There are so many people, and I don't know if they advertise in LA or not, but there's a lot of crazy commercials that they have in regard to their services.
And some of those are intentionally for fun. And I think that's great, because to get to your last part of your question, though, is what I do. I think you have to humanize yourself as a lawyer. And I think some of the crazy, funny advertising that we do see is part of trying to do that. Right? Look, at the end of the day, that lawyer you see on TV is a person that goes home to his or her family and is an everyday person, right? But how do lawyers overcome the stigma and the lawyer jokes? I think it's by being credible and being who we are and true to ourselves when we actually engage with the client. What you see right now is we're talking on this podcast, Sydney. This is Brian Williams as a human being and as a lawyer, and I don't change personas. I have to get, a little more aggressive at times in the practice of law than I do on my personal life. But from the perspective of, I don't mean physically aggressive. I mean, I'm an advocate, right? But at the end of the day, I want to meet my clients. I want them to meet me so that they can see the type of person I am and the type of human being I am. And hopefully our personalities match And therefore, we can make an effective team if we do have to go inside of a courtroom and try that case.
Okay. What advice would you give to survivors or families that are considering legal action? And, from any perspective, but in particular from the perspective of choosing the right representative of the law for them?
I would say, first off, speak up. It's a good thing. I know there's a lot of fear and anxiety that goes with it, but I also believe it's very empowering for survivors to have that voice and to be heard. Whether you retain me or not, I hope you feel better after the meeting. But I think it's a matter of just meeting with your lawyer. A lot of things nowadays are done online, right? You can hit boxes on websites and hire a lawyer without ever meeting them. You can go in those little chat boxes and literally hire a lawyer through a chat box, or pick up the phone and you can call that lawyer's office. All that stuff is fine in terms of making initial contact with the law firm. But if you're going to make a choice that involves, for example, hiring a lawyer to represent your child who's been sexually abused, I would encourage them to meet with that lawyer. I think you can learn a lot from a face-to-face conversation. Obviously, if it's practical, and Zoom's great now too. It doesn't have to be in person. You can have great, productive face-to-face like you and I are right now. And I'm sure we're in other states, Cindy, but it doesn't feel that way because we're having a normal, everyday human being conversation.
Yeah, I think we're in the same state. I'm in California. Yeah.
All right. You get my point, right? Like, even though we're not in the same room, it feels like it. And so, again, big answer to your question, I would say meet with that lawyer because you're going to spend a lot of time with him or her, and you need to make sure they're the right lawyer for you.
Okay. All right. I think that's pretty much all of my questions I had for you. Is there anything more that you'd like to share about why you chose to go into the law, about the actual education in terms of how long it takes and the dedication that it takes to get through law school? Because it's not easy.
Yeah, that's a lot to ask in one question. So, again, standard law school curriculum is 3 years. There are part-time programs to help people who want to do it, and work at the same time. I've seen some that are 4 years if you do it that way, but traditional law school takes 3 on top of your undergraduate degree. And then you get to study for the bar exam, and hopefully you pass it first time, and then you can be a lawyer. So it is a hard process. I would say that once you become a lawyer, it's even harder. I think people think, hey, I passed the bar exam. It's like, you won the Super Bowl and it's easy at that point. It's not. It's a very challenging job. It's a very all-consuming job. I work almost 7 days a week, or at least 6 almost every week. And I spend a lot of time that I could be doing something else, but I do it practicing law. But I enjoy that. I enjoy helping people. I enjoy, helping my employees, and I enjoy supporting my family, of course. So it's a challenging profession, but it's one with high rewards.
Okay. And then from a personal attributes perspective, what qualities or attributes do you think individuals need to be successful as a lawyer?
There's so many different people with so many different types of strengths and weaknesses can be lawyers. Like, what makes me successful from the context of being a litigator and someone who tries cases does not, for example, lend itself to being a contract lawyer who writes contracts all day long, because I get bored and I can't focus to that degree of attention on a document. But the converse is true too, right? I have some lawyers that work for me who are wonderful writers and researchers and come up with these novel legal theories in a way to advocate for our clients and or change the law for the better. Again, not my strength, but their strength. So there's a lot of different attributes. I think globally, though, the ability to communicate, whether that's visually or verbally or in writing, I think is a huge issue. I think your ability to relate with people, whether that's your opposing counsel, a judge, your coworkers, whoever it might be, is a huge issue. And just dedication to the ethics that underline our profession and the qualities that make lawyers a profession that people trust and go to in their time of need.
All right. Well, thank you, Brian. Thank you for your time. It's been my pleasure to speak to you.
You too. Thank you, Cindy. It was great.
Did you enjoy the show? Well, keep listening, and don't forget to like us. If you've been laid off or downsized or Need a career pivot? If you need resume help or to sharpen your interview skills, I can help you. Set up a complimentary 20-minute call with me on my website at www.insiderscareerclub.com. Until next time, may God bless you, keep you, and make his face to shine upon you. Take care.